Welcome back, everyone, to Diary of an Empath. My next guest is Elisha Covey. She's a self-made millionaire, a podcast host, a co-founder of an 8-figure business portfolio, including a company that she scaled 4,000% in less than 5 years. Very impressive. And she is also an advocate for entrepreneurship. I'm so excited to have her on. Elisha, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I'm sure we're going to have a blast.
I'm so happy to just actually get to see you kind of on in person in a way. It's on camera. So it's funny how I found your page. A friend of mine actually sent me a few of your videos and he's like, you got to have her on your podcast. And that's when I started listening to your podcast, watching some of your videos. And I'm like, yeah, I have to have her on.
Oh, give him my love and appreciation. Then I'm glad he connected us.
I will. I will. He'll be happy. So I was reading a bit about your story, and one thing that I saw that really stood out to me is that your mom struggled to make ends meet when you were younger. I would love for you to take me back to that time in your life and what that was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how most people feel, but when I was young, I didn't realize after my parents got divorced that we were broke. I was just like, oh, we are poor.
Oh,
But you're happy, you're a kid, you're doing your thing. And I think when it really dawned on me is when like the lights got turned off.
oh
And I was like,
wow.
oh, we are poor. Like
Hmm.
can't really make, things happen. And so I think I was 13 at the time, maybe just turned 14. And I was like, that's it, I'm gonna help my mom. Like I have to help my mom. I've been helping my family my entire life. It's kind of built into me, but I didn't realize that monetarily I could make an impact. And so I got my first job at 13 or 14 at Baskin Robbins. I just told them I was 16 and they didn't check my ID.
Oh
So it was just
wow.
like, hey, whatever you have to do. So I would go to school and then I would take the city bus to work after school and just work until 10 o'clock at night. And then either walk home or my mom would pick me up if she could. But that's kind of how that went. And you know what? It was very hard, I think, but I wouldn't change it because it created who I am. So I have the ability to know how to put in the work. It doesn't bother me at all. I've been putting in work for way too long. I won't say how many years, but it definitely taught me that if you want something, you have to go get it sometimes. It's
So
not just going to be given to
working
you.
Yeah, so working at 13 and you obviously have a great work ethic, but what did that teach you? Because I know that working from such a young age, having that drive, having that willingness to want to help and want to bring in monetary value to your own household at such a young age, I would love to hear what that brought to your life even now.
I think it aged me. And not in a bad way, but people always thought I was older than I was because I understood. So I had actually been working alongside my mom since I was 7. She was one of those women that always had a business on the side.
Mm.
And it usually, like MLM or whatever it was back then. I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, there's always some jewelry business or something going on. But I would be like stuffing invitations, answering phone calls. Hi, this is Alicia. Da, da, da. It's like 7 years old. And I think my voice might be a little bit deeper than most anyway. So they thought I was older than I was. But what it did was it taught me how to communicate with adults and what adults needed to feel safe, valued, want to spend their money. And it's like, oh, okay, so I understand this exchange that needs to happen, this energetic, and then also usually emotional if somebody's buying something, exchange that has to happen for this to go smoothly and for both people to walk away feeling fulfilled.
Do you feel like it took away from your childhood at all? Like, would you change anything about how it happened?
I don't think I would change how it happened because I like the outcome. Do I think that I missed certain things in my childhood? For sure. It's definitely been harder for me. I notice like when people want me to play, I'm like, I don't
Mhm.
know. I don't know what to do here. Or like if you'll go to entrepreneurial events or whatever, and they're always like, okay, get up and dance, and I'm like, no thanks. Like,
It's
I'm not getting up to.
uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable because I never
Yeah.
did it, and
Mhm.
a lot of times I had this one coach that like tried to push me. Like, oh, just get out of your comfort zone. I'm like, has nothing to do with the comfort zone. I don't find entertainment in that. And if I don't enjoy something, I don't force myself to do it. And so
Mhm.
I know they were like, damn. But it's just
Mhm.
like, I never did it. And so it isn't something that I have a fond memory of, jumping around dancing with people.
Yeah, and you obviously have a long line of history with working and entrepreneurship. So you started a journey of entrepreneurship and baking. Take me
Yes.
back to this time in your life. What made you start this journey and what made you want to open a business?
Yeah. So before I graduated high school when I was 16, I had got my first apartment when I was 16, started going to college and working full time. So I definitely, like I said, it aged me and it kind of made me see what I wanted and how I want what I thought I wanted and how I thought I wanted it to be. Let's rephrase. Um,
Hmm.
my first real big girl job was with AT&T and I sold advertising. So that was a very interesting job. I made a lot of money. I was 18 years old. I mean, back in the early 2000s, making over 100,000 a year. So
Wow.
not a common thing. I built my first house when I was 18. I just was kind of ahead of the curve. I also had met my husband my ex-husband now, when I was 16. We got married when I was 18, and I had our first child when I was 22. And I realized I didn't want to go back to work. I never thought that I would want to stay home, but then I did want to be home with him. And so I didn't want to go back to work. And I'd always loved baking. And so I just started kind of doing it from home for people because I had been asked to do it before. And then after I had my daughter, I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to give this a go. Like, what's holding me back? At that point, I was in the middle of a divorce from my ex husband. And so it was like, well, I'm either going to have to go back to work or I'm going to create my own scenario. And so that was really the jump for creating my own scenario. I didn't want to have my kids in daycare never seeing me.
Yeah, that makes sense too. And I feel like when you have kids, it changes your outlook on everything because now you go from it's just me to now I have other humans to take care of and to think about. Like for me, when I went in the military, it was just me. I didn't have anyone else to worry about. Then all of a sudden I had my daughter, like you, I was young. I was 21 when I had her. And everything changed. I had never thought about going to school. I had never thought about my 10-year plan. And all of a sudden I had her. And it's like, okay, I have to make moves and do things to take care of her. And especially when I got my divorce, it was like, okay, I got to do something different. Being a mom changes everything. Do you feel like once you had your kids, it changed your outlook on your future plans or even changed who you were?
Hmm. Uh, I think that having kids wasn't a huge revelation for me. I'd already raised four. Like,
Hmm.
to the point of my siblings would sometimes call me mom by accident.
Hmm.
So it's like I felt like I already understood the responsibility of a child and I already understood what providing for people felt like. So there wasn't much change there. The thing that I did notice was that you could love another human that much. I know there's like this little saying you see it float around sometimes, like there's somebody running around with my heart inside them. It
Hmm.
really does feel like that. And so for me, that was, I was like, whoa, this feels way different than taking care of my siblings. So
Hmm.
even though I adore all of them, they're wonderful. It just is, it's not the same. So I think that changed for me. But I found out 3 weeks before my daughter was born that my ex husband was cheating on me. And so
Hmm.
there was a lot of just drama and kind of crashing of facades that I thought were real, you know? And so I think that's what really catapulted me into, okay, the life that I thought I was going to lead is not going to be it. And so
Hmm.
I really need to think about what do I want to create from here moving forward, if that makes sense, because no one else is going to create it for you.
Hmm. And now fast forward, you meet your current husband, right? And you end up going into business with him. Okay, so tell me about this. What made you want to do this? How did this change? What was going through your mind?
So I met him 6 months after my divorce. And I was on like man hater rampage. I was just like, I will never get married again. Don't fucking try to take me on a date. I don't want to date you. Now, I mean, a girl has needs. So I was
Right.
definitely all about getting my needs met.
Right.
But I was like, okay, so what's the most efficient way for me to get my needs met without wasting a bunch of time? Because I'm like, dude, I have a full time, I have a bakery, I have three, you know, that I don't think I had three locations at that point, maybe just the one, and then the others came pretty quickly. But and I had a 1 year old and 3 year old. So it's like,
Mhm.
what time do I have for this? And
Right.
I actually met Charles on Match. And I just told him, I was like, don't try to date me. I'm not looking for not looking for anything serious. Don't whatever. And he was like, okay, cool, because neither am I. And I'm like, okay, they all say that. We'll see. And so that's kind of where that story came from. But he actually turned into my best friend. So obviously I
Mm-hmm.
was physically attracted to him. That's why we went out. But
Mm-hmm.
um, over time, he just became my best friend. And I was like, wow, there's no one in my life that gives me the feedback that he does and is just there by my side. And so after, I mean, I think 3 years we were on the phone one day and he was just like, God damn it, Elisha, be serious right now. I'm trying to figure out if I could marry you someday. And I just like silenced for like 20 seconds, busted out laughing and hung up on him and didn't talk to him for 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
He was just
Oh,
like, that was heart wrenching. And I was like, I told you not to try to marry.
oh my gosh.
Like, I don't know what to tell you, poor guy. He's so sweet. It was just like you. But sometimes he did ask me, like, how long am I going to have to pay for his mistakes? And it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, man.
Yeah.
You don't want to make somebody else do that, but it's just like you have to work through your healing process. And I did not have a lot of time between my first husband and meeting him. So he kind of got to see the entire process.
So how did you end up going into business with him? And were there challenges along the way? Because I cannot imagine being a single, very independent entrepreneur and then meeting a man and then all of a sudden being business partners with him. That to me is scary. I would love to hear how you felt about that and how did that even transpire?
Yeah. So we were together 4 years before we got into business together. So
Hmm.
it wasn't a quick jump. It wasn't
Okay.
at all.
Hmm.
Because you're right, that would be very strange. Like he didn't even meet my kids until we'd been friends for 3 years. I was
Hmm.
just like, nobody's meeting my kids. Nobody's getting. I was pretty. I'm not like not trusting anybody. But we literally had a conversation one day. I was talking about where Labella was going, which was my bakery, and he was like, Elisha, how many cupcakes do you have to make to be a millionaire? And as soon as he said that, I was like, I think in your asshole way, you're telling me I have a hobby.
Yeah.
And he was right. I had 23 employees who I adored and I loved what we did, but it was a hobby. I wasn't going to reach the financial goals that I had set for myself doing that, hoping that, oh, maybe it will blow up. Maybe it will become famous. Maybe, you know what I mean? Just
Hmm.
not realistic.
Hmm. And so you guys went into business together. Have you found that it's been challenging along the way? What is it like working with your spouse?
I would say it's not for the faint of heart. Like
Hmm.
you better know that you guys are strong. And when I mean strong, I mean real fucking strong because anybody can see each other for 4 hours a day and be sweet. Try spending 24 hours a day with someone and see
Hmm.
if you're sweet. And also try like building a business together because normally good business partners have opposite capabilities, right? And so, which is a great thing because you can cover a bigger area when you guys have different things that you're good at. But then those things are going to butt heads, especially
Hmm.
if you're both alpha. So there was many times where I fired him or I quit. And then it would be like 30 minutes later, all right, I'll see you at home. Like, you know
Right.
you're not quitting and you know you're not firing. Like in the beginning we would like fire each other. Like that's it. I'm fucking done with you. Get out. And then we realized like that's not the good deal. I'm going to leave. So I quit. And it's just like
So,
so childish. Like
mhm.
being starting a new business and it being hard and it being exhausting, it really will show you like the most childish behavior out of a person.
And you guys got through it and obviously very successful with what you do. I want to rewind because you talked a little bit about how you had to kind of go through almost like a cycle with your ex-husband of forgiveness. And I saw a post that you talked about a little bit about forgiveness and what you had to do to overcome this. How did you learn to forgive?
Girl, I did it the hard way. I'm always just like, God, please let me share these experiences so that someone else doesn't have to go through it. Because there was so much hate in my heart towards that man. Like, if feelings could kill, I murdered him at least 50 times a day. Like, I couldn't help myself. It's like,
Mhm.
and I think some people probably have the tendency to do this more than others, but that story would spin in my head like as background noise all day. So what he did to me, how many times he lied to me, just all the details would just circulate in there. And really, it was making me sick. It got to the
Mhm.
point where I felt so helpless against my own mental like capacity and what was going on in there. I just wanted it to stop. And so I ended up having to pay a pretty fucking penny for a coach that I found that I just knew he had something that I needed. I
Mhm.
didn't know what exactly he was going to be able to help me with, but he's the one that taught me that practice that you're referencing. And as I was going through all of these things in this horrible scenario that had happened, he was letting me vent about all of them. I got to write them all down, which is wonderful. You're like, yeah, motherfucker. Just like, I can't tell you how many poor Sharpies got murdered in that
Mhm.
practice. And then once we're done, he's like, great, now write something you're thankful next to each of those. Why? How can you be thankful for those? That part I was like, you're a dick for making me do this, but okay,
Mhm.
I'll do it. And then when he made me read it, that was like breakdown, because you're having to admit to yourself that, you know what, I'm not a victim. I don't want to be a victim. I never wanted to be a victim. But sometimes when events happen, you feel so victimized that it's just like you're justified in that. And everybody else will justify you being there because in their eyes, you've been victimized as well. So you're not just fighting against your own feelings of victimization. Your friends who are loving you and supporting you, and they don't mean to do it in a bad way, but they also feel like you've been victimized. So you have to be able to step out of that and really writing those things down of how I could be grateful for each one of those things that have happened really hit home. And then especially having to speak them, it's just more powerful that way.
It's like an echo chamber, it's like people around you like, fuck him, he ain't shit. And that sometimes, yes, in the moment it can feel empowering and it can feel validating, but sometimes it's good to have, like, I have my best friend Fee, who I'm so thankful for, and my one of my best friends, Christy, and they're those types of people that will say, well, have you ever looked at it from this point of view? And I used to get mad, and I'm like, why are you taking his side? And it took a lot of self-awareness and insight for me to realize, like, no, I have to see it from a different point of view, because forgiveness is not for the other person. It's for me. It's for me to move on. And what I realize is that a lot of times it's not your fault of what happened, right? But 9 times out of 10, when somebody does something or says something, it's their own triggers, it's their own trauma response, it's something that they're responding to. And more likely than not, it has nothing to do with you. And when you can kind of accept that and say, okay, like, I realized what happened. I'm aware of what happened. I don't want to have contact with that person, or I'm going to have limited contact, but I don't have to hold on to it. I release it. I acknowledge
Mm-hmm.
it. I release it. So now practicing that and practicing forgiveness has now allowed me to, when I come across people, like even on the internet, troll 52653 who says my podcast sucks. I used to get mad. Okay, I'll give you a good example. I've had five stars on my podcast for the entire time that my podcast has been alive. I must have had like 2 people give me a 1-star review. I don't know why. Maybe a guest on my podcast pissed them off, and it went down to 4.9. I was like, I really got triggered. I took this to heart, and then I had to be like, you know what? This has nothing to do with me. Let me just release it. What is meant for me is going to be, and just let it go. And it's allowed me the practice of forgiveness has allowed me to be more productive in those types of situations where before I would let it trigger me and
Yeah,
anger me,
yeah, yeah.
So I commend you for having to do that and to be aware of that the act of forgiveness is really in part your responsibility. Your healing is your
Yeah.
own responsibility. And so thank you for sharing that and being so vulnerable. You've obviously have had a very successful path in your journey of entrepreneurship. I would love for you to define what it means to be successful.
Oh, this is a good one, girl. You've got good questions. I'm like, that's a good one. And it took me a long time to truly figure that out. I don't know if I'm just, everybody else knows what success is. And for me, it was just kind of like, I'm not sure what that's going to look like for me. But I really didn't force myself. A lot of times I think we see stuff on social media and it's like, oh, these 3 pillars and your core values and you should know all these little things about, what you're doing. And it's like, damn, really? But my advice would be to just step back, I'm not saying don't think about the things, but you don't have to define everything. Not everything has to be defined. And when you step back, sometimes magic happens. And it's like your subconscious really thinks about it, even though you're doing other things, maybe even when you're asleep. But one day it just popped up to me, and I was like, you know what? I want to be free. I want to be free to do what I want, when I want, where I want, with who I want, and as many times as I want. And to me, that's the definition of success. That if I have that on my deathbed, and then I have the fact that I can truly say to myself only that I walked a path towards enlightenment. And for me, that's growth and knowledge, just constantly learning, then I'm going to be happy. Because it's just like, what more could you ask for there?
Yeah, money's great. And I think that, of course, it's like icing on the cake if, you're able to make a good income or strive for your goals. But if you talk to most people, look at who was it? Not Bill Gates. Who was the guy on his deathbed? Apple.
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs. So
Yeah.
Steve Jobs wrote this letter on his deathbed, and he essentially said, like, no money in the world is going to make you happy. He had so many regrets and things that he wished he'd done or things that he focused on. To me, I define success very similar to you: freedom, the ability to learn, and the ability to spend time with the people that I love, but also travel. Travel does require money, but
Yeah, I think you really just exactly said what I said.
yeah.
Yeah, same thing. So we want the same thing. Yeah.
I just want to travel the world, meet new
Yeah.
people, have culture. I want that human connection. I crave
Yeah.
it. And I think at our core, we all do. One thing that I always have, what I shared with you is the art of rejection was very difficult for me for a long time. How does somebody overcome rejection? How do you deal with rejection?
So I like to look at it, if we're talking about in sales and in business, I like to look at it as a game. So I use in every company that I have offered any sales expertise in, I always find out how many times am I going to have to make a connection before I close a deal. So what's my win ratio, right? And of course, it's just an average like anything else. But once I knew, for instance, at AT&T, if I make 10 calls, I'm definitely going to get two interested people and I'm definitely going to close one. And every rejection I got, I was like, oh, sweet, I'm closer to my number. Because, that doesn't lie. That's an average. It came from your numbers. And so I think that's one portion of it. And then the other portion you kind of hit on earlier, it's not personal. So when people reject you, you have no clue what that reason is. And there's no point in spending time trying to figure out, unless you think maybe it's personal and there's something you might need to, seriously take a look at it yourself. But if it's in business, it's not personal. Just move on. And the quicker that you move on with an energy that's positive, the sooner you're going to attract what you want. So that's kind of how I deal with that. I don't really
Yeah,
like that.
I think too, the sense of autonomy online has made rejection and even commenting hurtful things, it's very easy for people to do that now because there's no sense of responsibility. Anybody
Ownership.
behind, yeah, there's no ownership.
Yeah.
Anybody behind a keyboard, usually 5, 10, 20, can literally say whatever they want, state their opinion, make racist comments. I mean, they can say the most disgusting things that are out there and get away with it. But
Yeah.
had that person been in person, they would never
No.
say that. And yeah, it took a lot. It took some time for me to just like not even give in to the negative comments on social media. How do you deal with social media? Because as entrepreneurs, as content creators, we find ourselves online. So I love to ask content creators this question because it's something I'm still learning to
Working with.
navigate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it actually kind of goes back to that forgiveness practice. And
Mm.
I don't know if this is the same for everyone, but what I do know is for me, the first true step that I felt was kind of what you and I talked about, where I was able to forgive for myself. It's like it's not to say that whatever was done to me is okay, it's to free myself. And now I feel like I'm at a level, and I'm not sure if this is normal or not, but I don't even need to forgive people. I don't even feel the need anymore.
Mm.
So if somebody gets into it with me or they're saying something nasty, people do it all the time. I'm just like, dude, that sucks because they took the time out of their day. They were hurting enough. They're looking for help. It's just like we're all like children inside. So it's like good behavior, bad behavior. Either way, I'm getting attention, right? So it's attention seeking, and I'm just the mode that they're using to get that attention. And so if I can quickly say something nice to diffuse and let them know, hey man, I see your point of view. Thanks for sharing. I hope you have a good day. You would be shocked at how many people that I've said that to that have turned around and been like, man, I'm sorry. I
Mhm.
that's not what I'm going for. I don't need you to tell me that. It's okay. It's okay. I just want you to know you're loved. You know what? It's hard. Life's hard. Things sometimes are hard. And if you took it out on me, then I feel that the universe thought I was strong enough to handle it. And
Mm.
I really have to, to me, it's kind of like a responsibility. If I can hold the space for you and you need a vent and you need a dump, I'm strong enough. Go for it.
I love that. It's hard because we know sometimes when we're posting reels and we have 60 seconds to post something that is, you
And you
know,
don't get all the content in there,
you
and they're like,
don't get
"You, and you're like, oh my god, oh, I
like
have had men rip me new ones. What do you mean?
same.
Women work 4 hours of unpaid work. What are you supposed to be doing at home? And I'm just like, oh, breathe, breathe, breathe. It's a woman's show, and I didn't say anything about how many hours men work. It was just
Yes. Oh, like I made a video. I can't remember what it was. Like, I said women need to stop saying I don't need no man because, we need men, men need us. And I don't know, somebody came in there, what about people with disabilities? What about that? I'm like, listen, I can make a video for that too, but that's not, I'm like, my mind is blown right now. It's like people will take they will create their own narrative into something. I'm like, that's not what I said. That's not what my guest said. But I just stopped responding. I'm like, I'm not gonna do this no more. I had a guest, Ayana from Love Is Blind, love her, and God, the comments that she got on, I had to erase comments. I'm like, yeah, you're not doing this today. She should have done this before she got divorced, and she should have done that. I'm like, you guys don't even know the story right now. Like, you literally are watching a 60-second clip. Go listen to the podcast. I
yeah,
struggle with balancing that
negative
distance
energy.
and that energy. And I'm getting better at it, but I find myself struggling even with disconnecting from the social media aspect of things. How do you balance things? And I'm very careful of how I ask women this question because I feel like women get asked this more than men because they assume that, oh, well, you're a mom, you're this. How do you balance it all? And men don't get asked this question a lot. But I genuinely mean that from just a human perspective and you being an entrepreneur, being on social media, having a podcast, running a business. How do you find time to balance your energy and what works for you, what doesn't work for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So number one, I don't ascribe to the word balance. I don't think it's real. I think it's this balance means equals. So I would have to sleep 8 hours, I'd have to work 8 hours, then I've got 8 hours for my personal stuff. That would be balanced. But that isn't real life, especially not the real life of an entrepreneur. So what
Mhm.
I'm always looking for is harmony. How can I harmonize the different portions of my life? I look at every single thing that I do as an activity. It's either an activity that I get paid for or an activity I don't get paid for. And so then I need to realize and really pay attention to what my activities are for the day. Okay, what activities am I getting paid for? Is that enough in the businesses? And then what activities am I not getting paid for? That am I having enough enjoyment, right? Even sleep is an activity. It's a costly one, but it's very, very necessary. And so it's like there's never going to be a balance in my point of view, but there is harmony. So today I might need to do 7 hours of activity I'm getting paid for, and tomorrow maybe I only need to do three, and then I can spend the rest of that time, with my family or baking or whatever it is that makes me happy. I'm always looking for the harmony. How do I push myself forward, continue to grow, and then make sure that the areas in my life that I'm responsible for are harmonizing well?
I like that word harmony. We live in a hustle culture. Hustle harder, sleep when you die. And it sounds great, right? But that's just not
Until you're
it's
dying because you're
and
not sleeping.
yeah, and we wonder why we live in a society full of, disease and immunocompromised people. We like it's so bad, and it's to the point like I fell victim to that, and I had to get to the point where I'm trying to now not check my emails every hour because that's how bad it was getting. It's to the point where I'm like, I am checking my emails and my social media once an hour for what? For what? There's no need to check it that frequently. Like it can be checked twice a day. It does not need to be checked every hour on the hour. And that's where it was getting. So I was having a difficult time finding that harmony that you speak of. And I'm finally getting to the point where it's a necessity, because if I can't sleep till I die, or stay awake till I die, sleep when you're dead, hustle culture, you got to hustle to get what you want. Like, yeah, I believe in work ethic and having a solid work ethic, but man, you have to have that balance. And I feel like our generation, or maybe even our culture, doesn't do enough of that. I think we're getting better at it, but it's difficult. And
Yeah,
go ahead.
I agree with you, and I think that part of that is I think you hit the nail on the head. It's culture. So I like to travel so that I can see how is the rest of the world living. I think that we forget because we became as the United States a monetary powerhouse very quickly. And so in all of our brains, we're the best. That's like we're the
Mhm.
best place to live. And we obviously know what the fuck we're doing. That's how we got here. And it's like, not really.
Yep.
Really, we got here because most of the brightest minds in other countries left for the freedom of here. And then they created, with the amount of amazing natural resources that are here, huge businesses that skyrocketed us as a country to success. But what we forget is that we only have 250-ish or whatever years of history.
That's right.
So for me, it's really important that we go back to Europe, that we see how they're living. What are they doing? And so I take my kids every summer, we go on a 40-day adventure. And this past summer we were in Paris, and they got to really see the difference between, and the reason I do it that way is because I want them to feel like they lived somewhere else in the world so that they could fully be immersed. They have to know where the grocery store is. They have to know where the coffee place is for mom. It's most important. But like, yeah, make sure mom gets her coffee. I don't care where we are in the world. But it gave them and gives them the perspective of how other people are living. And you know what they noticed? They noticed that community is more important other places than here. So people don't work to live. They live and they do some work too. But just in Paris, as an example, they were like, Mom, there's all these old ladies downstairs by the river. What are they doing? And I'm like, that's called hanging out. They do it too. I know you never see it in the US. Like all moms do is run around and pull their hair out and drive you to this, drive you to that, take you there, do the. But in other countries, the women chill. I'm like, isn't this amazing? But they would be out at like, I kid you not, 11 o'clock at night, and these 50, 60-year-old women just out by the river with their legs hanging over and their bottle of wine. And I'm like, wow, people just want to connect. And I think you hit the nail on the head because you said here we're lacking that. And so we're trying to create it with social media. We're trying to create it. I think we're very becoming aware that there is a lack, but we don't know how to do it.
Yes.
And especially in this day and age. So we had this period of like no connection where everybody just worked. And now we're like, I think this isn't right. Now, how do I fix it? Because we have still social media and all these new things that have come around. And I think it's just going to take us all really understanding and trying really hard to be connected.
You hit the nail on the head with that one. I agree with everything that you said. I travel as much as I can with my daughter, and we have been to Europe several times. We just came back from Switzerland and Italy 2 months ago. And the reason why I love it. And the reason why I literally will not buy a Gucci purse, but I will take that money and take her on a trip, because that's my priority for her. I want her to see other cultures and other diversity, because it's something that I was not exposed to growing up. And let me tell you something, even when I was exposed to it and seeing her see other cultures, it made me realize how much of my life I was living that was wrong, and how much
Not even
human.
wrong, but closed. Dude, the
Right.
world was like this big. And then we're showing our children, which good for you. I'm so proud of you for doing that.
Thank you.
It's like we're showing them that the world is not only huge, but it's also small. So it's so easy to stay. We made so many friends in Paris. My kids were like, I'm going to go back. And they were like, are you going to hang out with Sylvia? Are you going to hang out with? And it's like, because the world has made it that we can have friends everywhere. How lucky are we? But we have to remember that with that technology, it also makes the world feel really big because we can all just sit in our homes on our computers, or
That's
we can
right.
choose to make the effort to connect.
I thought about moving to Europe or somewhere just for like a year, just to immerse myself and do like an eat, pray, love. I don't know what's stopping me. I'm like, maybe I should just wait until my daughter's a little older or maybe until she figures out what her next step is. But I still think about it. I'm like, maybe I'll meet, Mr. Right in Italy somewhere and move away for the rest of my life. So,
Yeah.
hey, if you're listening, I'm out
Yeah.
here.
Let me know. I mean,
I,
Europe is just, it's something else. And I mean, maybe might not be for everybody, but for me,
mhm.
it feels very, very warm and welcoming. I love that you can hop on a train and go see another country for the weekend so
Yes.
easily. I love that people want to take the time to share with you. And
Mhm.
I also love that we can see the differences between our cultures and
Yes.
then we can create who we want to become. And it
Mhm.
gives my children another role model. It's like, oh, look, this is how they do things there. Incorporate the pieces that you like.
That's right. Yeah. I just love the openness and the freedom. And I love history too. So I think history it really reminds us of where we came from. And one of the things that you said too, and I know this is off topic, but it's so profound is that a lot of the reasons why the US became the way that it is because people from overseas that had these great business ideas and these great concepts brought that here. And so I think it's important to remember too that as a society, we're so young and we're still learning and entrepreneurship is really growing rapidly. And now we see this new generation coming in. One thing I would love to get your opinion on is do you feel like this new generation of entrepreneurs is going to have a harder or an easier time now with technology and everything that's in their corner?
Hmm. Oh, I don't see it as harder or easier. I see it as different, you know? And God, it makes me feel really old to say that because I'm
I
like,
know,
oh
right?
yeah. Like look, I'm thinking back to, when I was 18 working at AT&T, that was 18 years ago. I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah,
yes, 18
I had
years
a
ago.
pager. I literally had a pager when I was
Oh,
13.
oh my God. Yeah. So we're so old, but I'm thinking back and I'm like, you know what? That's right before the internet kind of blew up into a thing. I mean, obviously there was internet, but it wasn't quite as wow. Google was just coming out. We were actually Google's sales team. So Google didn't
Mhm.
even have a sales team. They used AT&T because we were the best salespeople. And so
Wow.
we sold all of their products in the beginning of their kickoff. But that being said, I think that technology brings pros and cons, and it's very similar to what we just said. It makes you so accessible and then so inaccessible in the same way. So when I worked for AT&T, I would have to go out and see my clients. And I would talk to their secretary, make sure that they were going to be there, make an appointment, and then go see them. Now I text people. I'm just like,
Mhm.
hey, and I don't go see them. So it's
Mhm.
like, and a text is never going to be the same as that in-person connection. So harder or easier, I think there's pros and cons.
It's just different. We live in a
Yeah,
different
different.
society. One
Yeah.
post that you made that I thought was interesting, you talked about givers and takers. And I find this a lot, especially as an entrepreneur and a business, even with people that I personally know. I would love for you to expand on what that means when you say givers and takers.
So this is one of those ones that people lost their mind on. Like some people loved it, some people hated it. They're like stupid, and I'm like, you don't have to apply the information. I'm just telling you it works for me. So I used to think that there was just givers and takers. It's like, okay, well, you're either a giver, which I know that I am, or you're a taker. And then what I realized, and I saw it on a TED Talks, I think his name is Adam something, but I saw it like over a decade ago. And it just rocked my world because he was talking about the four types of givers and takers. And as soon as he said it, I was like, damn it, he's right. So basically, there's the traditional givers and takers. A giver is the person who will give you the shirt off their back. And then a taker is like, I always describe them as a vampire. Someone, we all know they're a vampire. It's like, just don't go near that person or else they're going to suck your blood, okay?
Mhm.
And if you do, you're stupid. But then the two others that are the hard ones, at least they were for me, is there's a disagreeable giver. So that's a giver like my husband. They're very, in the beginning, when you meet them, you're like, I can't tell if this person is a giver or a taker because they're not traditional givers are like, oh, I love you, da, da, da. They're not that way. But then you see that there's certain people inside their circle that they will give it everything to. And so I had to realize that, oh, that's what my husband is. Those types of givers, they kind of make sure that you're a good person before they allow you into their fold. Then once you're in their fold, they'll give you everything, just like a traditional giver. And then my favorite is the agreeable takers. It's like my ex-husband. I call them wolves in sheep's clothing. And it's just like, you think they're super sweet, they're so cool, they're this and that. And after you leave them, you're like, what happened? Like, wait a second, did I get screwed there? And then the next time you're paying for dinner again, and then the next time, and they forgot their wallet. Oh, they'll Venmo you when they get in the car. Oh, and you're like, wait, I'm always picking up our tab. I'm always the one that's over to help you. But whenever I need anything, oh, you're out of town or you're whatever. Those ones are the ones you have to watch out for, and they're the hardest to spot.
It's like very covert. I think that's important too when running a business, but even just like with people who you associate with yourself, because I always explain it like a room. If you have a room full of toxicity, you're not allowing space for healthy people. You're not allowing space for people who, may contribute to your life to be allowed in because there's no space left. So you have to create room. And sometimes that means making hard decisions to, even if you don't cut someone off, to take someone from the inner circle and pluck them and put them on the outer circle. And sometimes I know I had to go through that with personal relationships, not so much with business relationships. I've been blessed to meet people like you and, amazing people, but I've really had to be careful on who I allow into my circle. And I think you're absolutely right. Like the givers and takers are so many different kinds. Another thing that you talked about, and I feel like I'm on a roll with some of your posts, but they're just too good not to talk about. You said, don't compete to be a man. I hope I'm saying this one right. I found this post really interesting. So what are your thoughts on this? I would love for you to expand on that.
Yeah, I don't even remember what I said in that post. I'm sorry. I'm like, but I'm pretty sure I can come up with something here. It's from my point of view, and this doesn't have to be for everybody, but I feel like we got taught in my age group that we had to be as good as a man. Like they had done all of this fighting, all of these women rights, and now you do something with it. And it's like, wait, why does this fall on my shoulders? I don't understand, because they had fought so hard to get where we are. And then the next generation is responsible for carrying that forward, is what it felt like. And so then in order to do that appropriately, what I picked up as a child and turned into my mode of living was that I have to show everyone that I am just as good as a man is. I am just as good at everything that he does and just as good at all of my female things too. So I can do it all, and they will never beat me, and I will never show weakness. Now, if I'm at home crying about it later, better suck it up. Like there's no time to cry because you still have your woman's jobs to do. So it's like, oh my God. But what I realized as I lived that life is that the more that I tried to be the best man that I could be, the less of a woman I was, and the less of the best version of me that I was, because I was born a woman. So it's just like, I'm not paying attention to half minimum of who I am, because we all have feminine and masculine in us, but I'm completely ignoring half of that so that I can be better than men who are already naturally this way. And so I feel like what that really, when I stepped back and really started focusing on who is Elisha and what makes her happy and what do I really bring to the table to give to people, once that happened, I realized I don't ever want to be equal to a man. I just want to be the best version of me that I can be. And I want to be respected and then also compensated for that appropriately.
That's
So
right.
I'm not competing with Joe Blow. I'm like, you know what? And also, to tell you the truth, I usually made more than men because I was good at my job. So I never had that, like, he's getting paid more than me thing. But it could have just been because I was always in sales. But I don't want to compete with them. I want them to be the best versions of them and me to be the best version of me.
Do you think that you are a perfectionist? Would you consider yourself one?
A recovering perfectionist. Like I
Mm.
need like a little AA thing over there. Yeah, I was a perfectionist for a long ass time. And what I realized is there is no such thing as perfection. And I know that's like rocket science. No one's ever dropped that truth bomb.
Mhm.
But yeah, there is no such thing as perfection. It is unrealistic. And it also is self sabotage, because you know it's unrealistic when you try to be it. So it's like, why am I self sabotaging? you know? But I realized that along the way. And I was like, okay, so if I don't shoot for perfection, what do I shoot for? Because my standards are really high. And what I came to was, I want to do everything in excellence. I want to do it the best that I can with what I have. and I want to be proud of everything that I produce. And so excellence is always what I shoot for. Perfection it's irrelevant because it's not real.
Mm-hmm. So how did you overcome it? Was there certain steps that you took in order to change your mindset, or certain things that you had to change within yourself?
Yeah, I think it was really, really understanding that perfection didn't equal love. So I think that a lot of that came from childhood, and I'm not the type to like blame my parents. My mom, whatever. My mom did some shit. Don't most
Mm-hmm.
moms, but it's like I really think that that's where I associated. If I'm perfect and I can produce perfectly, then I'll be loved. And so it was
Yes.
always the goal of I'll be worthy enough when I'm perfect enough. And I think that really Charles was very helpful in this because the way that he did it is annoying. But he would always, when I started with that shit, he would be like, "I'm not your mother." And I
Oh.
would just be like, "I'm gonna kill you. Why are you talking about my mom?" And just like, "I'm just telling you, you're acting like this is 20 years ago and I'm your mom and I'm not your mom."
Mm.
And it used to really irk me. But then I realized he was trying to give me a like, "Hey, wake up, wake up, wake up." And finally it clicked for me. It was hard though, because when you
Mhm.
live most of your life that way, especially when there's things I think that are kind of ingrained in you as a child, whether it was ingrained by someone else or even from your own understanding.
I relate to that a lot. My perfectionism, I'm in, I wouldn't say I'm a recovered perfectionist, but I am in the process of being a recovered perfectionist. I think the first step is self-awareness, right? And like you, I'm pretty self-aware that it came from my childhood. For me, it was more of if I don't do everything perfect and be successful and make sure that everything aligns, there's no one there that is going to pick up the pieces. There's no one there that's going to be able to help me. So it's me or nothing. And it became my identity. Like everything that I do, there's no half ass. Like when I went into the military, it's like, okay, well, what's the hardest branch? The Marine Corps. That's what I did. What I do after, worked in a prison, like, oh, can't be that hard. I can do it. Oh, want to start a podcast? I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to I want to go to grad school. I'm going to finish like everything that I've done has been because I'm afraid if I don't do it or if I fail, that I'm going to lose everything and no one's going to be able
Mm.
to help me. And so it's a trauma response for me. Now, has it helped me in my life? Sure, of course. But it's also been at the detriment of that harmony that you talked about, sleep, that balance of being able to do things that I like in terms of recharging, getting enough rest, so all of those things has affected who I am. And it's not until now at the age of 37 that I'm finally like, I have to force myself to slow down. Like, you don't need to take on the world at all times. It's not a requirement. Like, you're going to be okay. And I almost wish somebody could give me that advice, or that would be my advice to my younger self. If you looked back at your younger self, what advice would you give to younger Elisha?
Yeah, I think that was such a beautiful one that you said. I would probably just say, breathe. It's not that big of a deal. Like everything until I was probably 30 was a catastrophe. It's just like, oh no, it kind of sounds similar. Like this can't happen.
Mhm.
No, no, no. And I would do whatever it took for it to be perfect again. And then what I realized is like, as you said, this is at the detriment of your emotional, your physical, all of it, your well-being. And then when you look back, you're like, it's so funny because I never had a problem that I couldn't solve. Have you?
I've
Haven't you
never,
made it through every
I've
problem?
always gotten through. I've always found a way.
Right.
It's a
So
survival
all those
method.
times that you got twisted and like freaking out and your body's dumping all sorts of hormones, you're just like, this isn't right, this isn't gonna work. And it's like, no, actually it will because it always does.
That's
And
right.
so now I'm just like, there's never been a problem that I haven't been able to solve. I'll solve this one too. And really, if you can look at it like that, and then as you continue to grow, I think you get to look at things in a different manner of being more fun. I'm just like, sometimes when I feel overwhelmed, I'm like, oh my God. I used to say, my thing was, I don't have enough time. I can't get it all done. Like, that's what I would say. And then now what I say is, wow, I have so many opportunities that I can't even get to all my blessings.
Oh,
This
that's
is a great
great.
position because then what do I do? Well, I'm a child sitting here. It's Christmas time. I've opened all the gifts. I can't play with them all. What does a child do? They pick their favorites. So that's what you get to do. And it's like, whoa, huge mind shift
I
of
love that.
overwhelm, being drowned, can't get it all done, to, oh, I just get to pick the best things to operate with now. I'm constantly leveling up because of that. And so it's just way more fun to live life that way.
I love that. Elisha, thank you so much for just your time, your energy, sharing your story, and just the opportunity to be able to talk to you and relate. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I had a wonderful time with you. I feel like we have a lot in common. I'm like,
I know
oh,
we do.
similar. But
I
aren't we
love it.
all? Don't we have so much more in common than we normally realize? It's like, yeah,
Yes.
we're all human.
We just got to take the time to get to know each other and talk to each other. See, lesson
Yeah.
learned. You guys got to talk to each other more, humanize,
Connect.
connect.
I agree. I agree. All right, doll. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day. Thank you again for having me.